You've never met your parents. You don't know their names, what they looked like, or whether they ever wanted you at all. For as long as you can remember, all you've known is the orphanage. It was an old place, grey and rotting, like it had been sad for longer than anyone living in it. The walls were stained. The floors creaked. Everything smelled faintly of mildew, soap, and cold soup. In winter, the radiators barely worked. In summer, the rooms turned hot and stale. The older kids said the building used to be something else before it became an orphanage, but nobody knew what. Nobody really cared. It was still the only home you had ever known. The only good thing in that place was your two friends. They had been there as long as you had, or at least as long as you could remember. The three of you had grown up side by side in that depressing place, sharing food when one of you was still hungry, whispering to each other at night when the dark felt too heavy, and making up games out of scraps and broken toys just to keep from going insane. They weren't really your siblings, but they might as well have been. They were the closest thing you had to family, so when things started changing, the only reason you weren't completely terrified was because they were still with you. It started at the beginning of 3rd grade. That was when the first man in the lab coat came around. He didn't belong there. You could tell that right away. He didn't look like the workers, or the nuns, or the miserable cooks in the kitchen. He looked clean. Too clean. His shoes were polished, his glasses spotless, and he always carried a little notepad in one hand, scribbling things down while he watched all of you. At first, he just stood in corners, observing. He watched you while you ate. He watched you while you played. He watched you while you lined up for lessons. He hardly ever spoke. He just stared with those blank eyes and wrote things down like you were some kind of math problem he was trying to solve. Then more of them came. More lab coats, more clipboards, more pens scratching on paper. And Aldi didn't just stand in corners. They followed you. Not just you, but your two friends too. Everywhere you went, they were there, trailing behind like ghosts, whispering to each other, writing notes, watching how fast you ran, how high you climbed, how quickly you answered questions. One time one of the men asked you to stack blocks while he timed you. Another one asked your friend to solve a puzzle. Another made the three of you run across the yard while he jotted down numbers. None of it made any sense. And then one morning, without warning, everything changed. You were told you were being moved. That was the word they used. Moved. Nobody explained what that meant. The adults at the orphanage wouldn't answer questions. Some of the younger kids cried. Some of the older ones tried to act tough, but you could see the fear in their faces too. Kids got moved sometimes, but not like this. Not in groups. Not with strange men in lab coats waiting outside. You were scared, but you kept telling yourself one thing over and over. At least your friends were with you. That was enough. It had to be. They led all of you outside, where a line of bright, colorful trucks waited by the road. They were almost blinding after the dullness of the orphanage. Painted in cheerful reds, yellows, and blues, with smiling cartoon faces and big painted letters on the side. Playtime Co. You stared at the words, trying to place them. Playtime Co. Weren't they the toy company? The one that made the dolls, and the plushies, and the commercials you'd sometimes see in the common room when the workers let the television run too long? That thought barely had time to settle before the truck doors opened. Inside were toys. Mountains of them. Boxes full of dolls, plush animals, toy trains, puzzles, little plastic figurines, bright rubber balls, and rows of this Poppy Playtime doll. You and your friends forgot your fear for a second and rushed right in. For the first time in your life, it felt like luck had chosen you. The three of you laughed as you dug through the piles, tossing toys to one another, hugging plushes, making stupid voices, pretending for just a little while that this was some kind of magical field trip instead of whatever it actually was. But, after a while, the excitement faded. There were no windows in the truck, no clock, no way to tell how long you'd been in there. At first it was fun, then it was boring, then it was uncomfortable, then it was unbearable. Your stomach hurt so badly it felt like it was folding in on itself. The air inside the truck got stuffy and hot. Some kids cried, others just curled up in corners and tried to sleep. You had no idea how many hours had passed. It could have been 1 day, it could have been 3. All you knew was that it felt endless. Eventually, you got so hungry and tired you thought you might pass out. Then the doors opened. For one stupid, hopeful second, you thought you'd see sunlight. Instead, you saw steel. A long steel hallway stretching ahead under flickering white lights. The truck had backed into some kind of loading dock. Cold air spilled inside, sharp and metallic. Before you could even get your bearings, hands were on you. Rough hands, gloved hands. The men in lab coats grabbed kids by the arms and pulled them down from the truck. You tried to stay close to your friends, but the crowd was chaos. Children stumbling everywhere, crying, shouting, trying not to get separated. The men marched all of you through a maze of steel corridors. Everything echoed. Your footsteps, their footsteps, the occasional distant clang from somewhere deeper in the building. It smelled like metal, cleaning chemicals, and something else underneath it all. Something sickly sweet and rotten. Then, suddenly, the hallway ended, and you stepped into what looked like heaven. The room was massive. So huge you couldn't even see all of it at once. It looked like a toy store the size of a city block. Bright lights glowed overhead. There were jungle gyms and slides, colorful game stations, giant puzzle boards, climbing nets, spinning rides, toy shelves taller than any adult you knew, and a train running along a track that wound through the entire room. Everywhere you looked, there were colors, reds, pinks, yellows, blues. Everywhere you looked, there were children. Thousands of them. Laughing, running, playing. It was overwhelming. You had never seen anything like it. The orphanage had been all grey walls and whispered misery. This place was alive, loud, warm, impossible. Kids were eating candy and playing games and climbing over padded structures. There was music somewhere, soft and cheerful. People handed out trays of food that smelled better than anything you had ever eaten in your life. For one impossible moment, you thought this had to be paradise. You thought maybe, somehow, your life had finally started. And then you saw her. At first, you didn't understand what you were looking at. Something pink. Something tall. Something moving in a way that made your stomach drop. It was like a giant spider and a woman had been mashed together into one thing. Long limbs bent and stretched in ways limbs shouldn't. Her smile was huge and bright, and she moved among the children as if she belonged there, picking them up, hugging them, laughing with them. You froze. What the hell was that? Every instinct in your body screamed at you to run. Then she noticed you. She turned, and those huge eyes locked onto yours, and before you could react, she came gliding over with terrifying speed. You tried to step back, but she was already there. "Hello, baby," she said in a sweet, warm voice. She introduced herself as Mummy. Then she wrapped those long arms around you in a hug. And somehow, your fear lessened. It didn't disappear, not completely, but it softened. There was something strange about the way she held you, like being squeezed by something too strong but too careful to hurt you. When she pulled away, she smiled, like she knew exactly how frightened you had been. After that, the days blurred together. The next 2 weeks were the best of your life. Delicious food, soft beds, endless playtime, games, toys, laughter, songs. For the first time ever, you felt wanted. And best of all, your friends were there too. The three of you stuck together through everything, exploring the giant play areas, riding the train, eating more than you ever thought possible. Sometimes you'd catch men in lab coats watching from balconies or behind glass windows, but it didn't matter as much anymore. Not while things felt this good, not while you had them. Then one day, they were gone. Just like that, men in lab coats came for them in the middle of the afternoon. No explanation, no warning. They called their names, put hands on their shoulders, and guided them toward the train. You yelled. Your friends yelled too. One of them twisted around to look at you, terrified, and you can still remember that exact look on their face. The confusion, the panic, the helplessness. You never saw either of them again. The moment they disappeared, the place changed. It was still colorful, still bright, still full of toys. But now it all felt fake. The music sounded wrong. The smiles felt forced. The laughter of the children around you started to sound less like happiness and more like denial. Your thoughts spiraled. Where did they go? Why didn't they take you to? Were your friends okay? Were they scared? Were they looking for you the same way you were looking for them in every crowd, every hallway, every passing train car? You stopped enjoying the games. You stopped sleeping well. You started noticing things you hadn't before. The kids who weren't laughing. The ones who whispered in corners. The ones who flinched whenever the lab coats came near. Some of them said terrible things. They said children were taken to a room and never came back. They said the people here killed them. You thought that was insane. How could they know that? Kids made things up all the time, didn't they? Then one day, they came for you. The men in the lab coats took you into enormous game rooms, deep inside the building, places even bigger and stranger than the play areas. Rooms full of obstacles, memory tests, puzzles, balance beams, reaction games, machines with blinking lights, and giant play structures designed to test speed, intelligence, coordination, fear. At first, it was almost fun. You ran the courses, solved the puzzles, climbed faster than the others, reacted quicker, remembered patterns better. You did everything they told you to do, and every time you finished something, the men stared at their papers in disbelief. One of them actually smiled. Another whispered to the others. Then one man crouched in front of you and said, almost excitedly, "You're one of the best children we've ever seen." For a second, warmth spread through your chest. You felt special, chosen, important, wanted again. It felt good, until you remembered your friends. Then the feeling curdled into fear. Soon after, they brought you to a room that looked like a doctor's office. That was what they called it, anyway. But it didn't feel like any doctor's office you'd ever imagined. The lights were too bright, the walls were too clean. The metal table in the center of the room looked more like something for cutting meat than helping people. There were straps hanging from the sides. You hesitated. One of the men told you to lie down. You did, because what else could you do? And before you could even ask a question, they strapped you in. Your wrists, your ankles, your chest. So tight you could barely breathe. Panic hit instantly. You thrashed. You begged. You screamed for your friends, for Mummy, for anyone. But the men just stepped back and left the room. Then the door opened again, and a different man walked in. He wore a mask. Not a surgical one, not the kind doctors wore. This was something thicker, stranger, more inhuman, with dark round lenses over the eyes, that made him look less like a person and more like some kind of machine. In his gloved hand was a syringe filled with glowing green liquid. The second you saw it, you knew. This was where your friends had gone. This was where the happy kids went. This was where the smiling ended. You started screaming before he even reached you. You thrashed against the straps until your wrists burned raw, begging him to stop, begging for Mummy, begging for your friends, begging for anyone to help you. But nobody came. Nobody ever came. The masked man didn't say a word. He just leaned over you, found your arm, and pushed the needle in. The pain hit instantly. Not like a shot, not like a cut. It felt like something alive had been poured straight into your veins. A burning, writhing thing that spread through your arm and into your chest, your stomach, your neck, your skull. You screamed so hard your vision flashed white. Your whole body arched against the table as the straps dug deeper into your skin. Then you looked down. Your arm was changing. The skin darkened first, then stretched tight. Blue began to spread beneath it in ugly, blooming patches. For one horrible second, you thought maybe it was just bruising. Then your skin split open. You felt it tear. You felt it peel apart as thick blue fur pushed out from underneath, forcing its way through your flesh. You could actually hear it, a wet ripping sound mixed with your own screaming. More fur spread over your arm, crawling across your shoulder and chest like mold growing in fast motion. No, 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 no. You didn't even realize you were saying it. Your fingers locked up, then cracked. Not one or two pops, a whole chain of sickening snaps. Your hands stretched longer, wider, wrong. Your joints shifted with a grinding pressure that made you want to vomit. Every bone in your body felt like it was being pulled out of place and rammed back in different. Then your jaw started to hurt. At first, it was just pressure. Then it felt like someone had hooked both sides of your mouth and was yanking them apart with all their strength. Your teeth ached, then sharpened. Your lips split at the corners. You tried to scream again, but the sound came out warped, wet, broken. Your face was changing. You could feel fur pushing through your cheeks, your forehead, your chin. Your nose flattened. Your eyes burned. Something inside your head felt like it was pressing forward, reshaping you from the inside out. The masked man just stood there, watching. Watching like this was normal. Watching like this was a miracle. You tried to call for your friends one last time, but the words were already coming out wrong, thick and mangled in a mouth that no longer fit you. Your chest convulsed, your ribs stretched, your spine arched so hard you thought it would snap in half. The straps were the only reason you stayed on the table at all. Your body was getting bigger, taller, longer. The table groaned under you. Metal bolts squealed. One of the restraints finally broke with a loud crack, then another. Still the transformation kept going. Blue fur covered everything now. Your hands weren't hands anymore. Your arms were too long. Your legs kicked wildly beneath the straps, and you could barely feel where your own skin ended and whatever this thing was began. Then came the worst part. Not the pain. Not the bones breaking. Not your face splitting into something that smiled when you didn't want to. It was the moment your memories started slipping. At first, it was small things. The ceiling of the orphanage. The sound of your friends laughing at night. The way the three of you used to whisper under the blankets. Then bigger things. Their faces. Their names. You fought to hold on to them, but they were being dragged away into some deep, dark place in your mind. Drowned beneath pain and chemicals and whatever they had turned you into. No, you thought. No, please. Not them, anything but them. Your body slammed so hard against the restraints that the last strap tore loose. You crashed sideways off the table, too big now, too wrong, your limbs flailing across the floor. Men rushed in, shouting, boots pounding, hands grabbing at you, but their voices sounded far away. Your vision flickered through tears and blood and strands of blue fur hanging over your face. Then you saw it. A reflection in the steel cabinet across the room. A tall blue thing on all fours, all tangled limbs and fur and impossible proportions. A wide red mouth stretched across its face, rows of teeth, eyes too round, too empty, still wet with tears. You stared at it, and it stared back. That thing was you. You tried to scream again, but what came out wasn't a child's scream anymore. It was a deep, rattling, animal sound that made the men stumble back. Somewhere beyond the panic, beyond the pain, one of the scientists laughed in disbelief. Another whispered, "It worked." The masked man slowly crouched in front of you. Even through the blur in your vision, you could see him smiling beneath the edge of the mask. He said something softly, almost proudly. "Welcome to playtime." After that, everything became flashes. A cage, needles, voices through glass, tests, commands, bright rooms, dark rooms, the smell of blood, the smell of plastic, the sound of children laughing somewhere far away. You stopped understanding how much time had passed. Days meant nothing. Nights meant nothing. Hunger was a monster inside you. The people who came near you were always careful, but never careful enough to hide what they thought of you. Prototype, behavioral success, ideal obedience, potential, mascot viability, bigger body, stronger bite. They stopped talking about you like you were a child. They talked about you like you were a product. And little by little, the last pieces of yourself kept fading. But not completely. Somewhere deep inside that giant blue body, buried under pain and programming and starvation, a tiny part of you still remembered what it felt like to be small, to be scared, to have two best friends, and one day they took you through a hallway lined with glass. Inside one of the rooms, for only a second, you saw something that made your whole body go still. A toy, tall, blue, smiling, soft fur, long arms, yellow hands and feet, a name printed on the display beside it. Huggy Wuggy. The scientists noticed you looking. One of them chuckled. "Perfect," he said. "That was when you understood. You had never been brought here to play. You had never been brought here to live a better life. You hadn't even been brought here to survive. You had been brought here to become him. And somewhere in the deepest, darkest corner of your mind, where the last frightened piece of the orphan still hid, you finally understood what happened to your friends too. They weren't missing. They were still here. Somewhere in this factory, changed, waiting, just like you." Then the men opened the door to a larger room and led you inside. There were chains hanging from the ceiling, a painted smile on the wall, a giant sign overhead. Your new home, your new stage, your new name. And as they sealed the door behind you, you caught your reflection one last time in the polished metal. The red lips, the endless grin, the blue fur, the eyes that no longer looked human. Huggy Wuggy smiled back at you. And this time you smiled too.